AITA for canceling my wedding after her ex secretly funded it? My name is Logan. I'm 30, and I work as a project manager for a company that designs scheduling software for hospitals. It sounds more exciting than it is. Most days, I'm staring at color-coded timelines, drinking cold coffee, and trying to convince nurses and IT directors that just one small change is never actually small. I was engaged to Tessa, who I'd been with for almost 4 years. She worked in nonprofit fundraising, which meant she could charm a donation out of someone who only came to the event for the free wine. I love that about her. She made people feel seen. Or at least, that's what I thought. By the time everything fell apart, we were 6 weeks away from getting married at a converted warehouse venue on the east side of town. We had a guest list, a deposit-heavy vendor spreadsheet, a lavender honey cake flavor I had pretended to care about, and a dog named Pickle who had already chewed through one of our RSVP cards. Our duplex was the kind of old Portland rental that looked charming in photos and mildly haunted in person. The hardwood floors sloped just enough that Pickle's tennis ball always rolled toward the front door. The kitchen cabinets never closed all the way. Packages left on our porch absorbed rain like sponges if we didn't grab them within 20 minutes. Tessa said the place had character. I said the place had a landlord who owned one screwdriver and a dream. Still, it was ours. Or it felt like ours. On Sundays, we made eggs in the tiny kitchen and argued gently about whether Pickle needed another walk. On weeknights, Tessa curled up on the couch with her laptop, writing donor emails, while I sat at the table adjusting project timelines. She would read me ridiculous lines from gala invitations, and I would pretend to be offended when she called my spreadsheets deeply unsexy. Wedding planning changed the texture of the house first. It wasn't dramatic at the beginning. There were just more calls, more notifications, more moments where Tessa would glance at her phone and take it with her into the bedroom or out onto the porch, even when it was raining sideways. She would come back with that polished fundraiser smile, the one that said everything was fine because she had already decided how everyone should feel about it. At first, I blamed the wedding. Everyone tells you planning a wedding is basically a second unpaid job, except nobody gives you health insurance, and every decision costs $1,800. I had my spreadsheet with vendor deposits, due dates, and payment notes. Tessa had Pinterest boards and a little notebook full of sketches for table settings. Our families had opinions nobody asked for. My older sister, Maribel, wanted us to elope after she saw the catering estimate. "Logan," she said, standing in our kitchen with a bottle of grocery store wine, "you could buy a used Subaru for what these people want to charge you for chicken." "It's salmon, too," Tessa said. Maribel looked at her. "That makes it worse." Tessa laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. That happened a lot toward the end. Her face would do the right thing a second before the rest of her caught up. Tessa's dad, Graham, had his own list of objections. He was a quiet man with gray hair, heavy glasses, and the permanent expression of someone reviewing a disappointing invoice. Every time we mentioned wedding costs, he looked like he was watching civilization collapse. "Do you really need signature cocktails?" he asked during one Sunday dinner. Tessa's mom said, "Graham, I'm just asking. Since when does a drink need a signature?" Tessa rolled her eyes. "Dad, please." I thought that was normal family stress. I thought the weirdness in Tessa was pressure, not guilt. Then Nolan started appearing. Not physically at first, just as a name. "Nolan from college knows a good photographer," Tessa said one night while we were eating Thai takeout from cartons because neither of us wanted to wash plates. A few days later, it was, "Nolan might be able to help with the lighting setup. He does event production now." Then, Nolan said the venue coordinator is probably overcharging us for uplights. I looked up from my laptop. How does Nolan know what our venue coordinator is charging us? Tessa was standing at the counter, barefoot, tapping through her phone. I mentioned it. "To Nolan from college." She glanced at me. "Why are you saying it like that?" "Like what?" "Like I need a permission slip to talk to someone I knew before you." That shut me up, which I think was the point. I didn't want to be the insecure fiancé. I didn't want to be the guy who acted like a woman having male friends was a crisis. So I nodded, went back to my spreadsheet, and told myself the uncomfortable feeling in my chest was just wedding stress. But the word she kept using bothered me. "Connected. He's just connected," she said when I asked how close they were. "Connected to vendors. Connected to venues. Connected to people in the nonprofit scene. Connected, apparently, to every room Tessa wanted to enter. The first real crack happened during our venue walkthrough. The venue was in Buckman, a renovated industrial space with exposed brick, high ceilings, Edison bulbs, and a cancellation policy so strict it sounded like it had been written by someone recovering from a divorce. I mostly loved that it had decent parking nearby and didn't smell like mildew. Our coordinator, Elise, carried a clipboard like it contained nuclear codes. She was walking us through the timeline, pointing at outlets, exits, and the place where the DJ booth would go. Tessa was describing the floral arch when a guy in a charcoal jacket walked through the side entrance like he belonged there. Tessa froze for half a second. Not long. Not dramatically. If I hadn't been looking at her, I might have missed it. The guy smiled. Hey, Tess. Not Tessa. Tess. I felt something small and sharp move behind my ribs. Tessa laughed too quickly. Oh, hey. Logan, this is Nolan. Nolan, Logan. He was tall, dark-haired, handsome in a curated way. Clean shoes. Expensive watch. The kind of guy who looked casual only because he had spent money on looking casual. He shook my hand and held it a beat too long. Congrats, man, he said. Big step. Thanks, I said. Didn't know you were coming today. Tessa cut in before Nolan could answer. He was nearby? I asked him to look at the lighting since Elise said the uplights might be weird near the windows. Elise blinked. I didn't say weird. I said we'd need to confirm power access. It was such a tiny correction, but it landed hard. Nolan looked amused. Tessa looked annoyed. I looked at the exposed brick wall and realized I was the only one in the room who didn't understand the room. For the rest of the walkthrough, Nolan stood too close to Tessa without technically doing anything wrong. He commented on sight lines. He mentioned the warm tone of the bulbs. He asked Elise whether the venue allowed haze machines, and when she said no, he smiled like that proved something about the place. At one point, Tessa touched his sleeve to get his attention. Just 2 fingers, barely anything. I saw it anyway. On the drive home, rain tapped the windshield, and Tessa scrolled through her phone in the passenger seat. So, I said carefully, Nolan seems very comfortable with the venue. He works in events. Right? She sighed. Can we not start? I'm not starting. I'm asking. No, you're doing that thing where you act calm, but make me feel interrogated. That hit exactly where she aimed it. I spent the rest of the drive wondering whether I had been unfair. By the time we got home, I was the one apologizing. That became a pattern. After the walkthrough, Nolan was harder to ignore. He liked Tessa's old Instagram photos at midnight. Not new posts. Old ones. A photo of her in a red dress from a gala 2 years earlier. A college picture of her standing on a beach with Paige. A blurry shot of her laughing at some downtown bar before I knew her. He texted her during dinner. Once, while we were eating leftover chili at the kitchen table, her phone lit up with his name. She turned it face down so fast the spoon in her hand clinked against the bowl. You can answer, I said. It's nothing. Okay. She looked irritated. Please don't do that. Do what? Make nothing into something. Another time, he sent her a playlist called For the After Party. She claimed it was for the reception. Why is a college friend making our wedding playlist? I asked. Because he has taste, Logan. That bothered me more than it should have. Not because I cared about the playlist. If the DJ played music that kept people from forming a conga line, I considered that a win. It was the way she said it. Like I was some boring obstacle between her and a more interesting version of herself. One Saturday, we had dinner with Paige, Tessa's maid of honor, and Paige's boyfriend at a taco place in Selwood. It was one of those restaurants with metal chairs, tiny tables, and margaritas strong enough to make everybody honest if you waited long enough. I waited until we were halfway through the chips. So how long have you known Nolan? I asked Paige. Paige's face changed. It was quick, but not quick enough. College, she said. Tessa kicked her under the table. I know because Paige's margarita jumped. I took a sip of water and pretended not to notice. Was he part of your friend group? Paige looked at Tessa, then back at me. Kind of. Tessa jumped in. Not really. He was around. People can be kind of around, Paige said weakly. Tessa gave her a look. The conversation moved on to bridesmaid shoes and hotel blocks, but I had stopped tasting the food. Across the table, Tessa was smiling and nodding, performing normal. Paige kept glancing at me like she wanted to apologize for something she had not technically done. That night, while Tessa brushed her teeth, I stood in the hallway holding Pickle's leash and felt like an idiot. Not because I knew something was wrong, because I had known for a while and kept asking questions designed to let her lie politely. My first actual evidence came from something stupid: dog daycare. Pickle went to daycare every Thursday because both Tessa and I had long office days. He was a wiry little rescue mutt with the emotional needs of a Victorian poet, and if we left him alone too long, he expressed himself through property damage. Thursday daycare was cheaper than replacing another doorframe. One Thursday, at 5:40 p.m., the daycare called me. "Hi, Logan. This is Amy from Paw and Play. Pickle's still here." I checked the time on my monitor. I was in the middle of a client escalation, 3 Slack windows blinking, a hospital administrator asking why a rollout date had moved. Tessa was supposed to pick him up. "Oh, sorry," I said. "Tessa should be on her way. We close at 6, so I just wanted to check. I'll call her." Tessa didn't answer. I texted her. "Hey, Pickle's still at daycare. You close?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, she wrote, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Fundraiser meeting ran late. Can you grab him?" I could. I did. I left the client call with a fake internet issue, drove through wet traffic, and arrived at daycare with 6 minutes to spare. Amy brought Pickle out wearing a bandana with pumpkins on it, even though it was March. He threw himself at me like I had returned from war. "No worries," Amy said as I clipped his leash. Her friend stopped by earlier and asked if Pickle was here, but he wasn't on the pickup list. The lobby felt suddenly smaller. "What friend?" "Tall guy, dark hair. Said he knew Tessa." I pulled up Nolan's Instagram profile and turned the phone toward her. She nodded. "That's him." Pickle tugged at the leash, eager to leave. I stayed still. Did he say why he was here? Not really. He said he was nearby and could grab him if needed, but we can't release dogs unless they're approved. "Right," I said. "Of course." I thanked her, took Pickle home, and sat in the car outside our duplex for several minutes while rain slid down the windshield. Pickle panted happily in the back seat. He had no idea he had just become evidence. That night, Tessa came home with damp hair and a canvas tote bag from a nonprofit arts event. She smelled like white wine and someone else's cologne, or maybe I imagined that part, because by then my brain was starting to collect details and sharpen them into weapons. I waited until she took off her coat. Why did Nolan go to Pickle's daycare today? She didn't even look confused. She looked caught. Then she recovered. What? Nolan went to Pickle's daycare. Amy said he tried to pick him up. He didn't try to pick him up. He was just nearby. I stared at her. So you knew? I might have mentioned I was running late. You didn't answer my calls. I was in a meeting. You had time to tell Nolan? She turned to the dishwasher and started loading a mug that was already clean. Can you not do this right now? Do what? This suspicious thing. You must have mentioned our dog's daycare to your college friend? She slammed the dishwasher shut. I said not right now. That sentence became her favorite shield. Can you not do this right now? Not, that didn't happen. Not, I understand why that looks bad. Just, please stop making me deal with the consequences of the facts. I slept badly that night. Tessa slept with her back to me, curled tight at the edge of the mattress. At 2:13 a.m., her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it before I could even move. The truth came from Paige, but not on purpose. 4 weeks before the wedding, I was at work eating a sad desk lunch from the food carts near our office, trying to convince myself that lentils counted as morale, when my phone started vibrating with rapid group text notifications. The chat name was Tess Final Details. For about 15 seconds, nobody realized I was in it. Paige wrote, Nolan is asking if he's still supposed to send the second half before Friday, or if G is covering it. Another bridesmaid replied, do not put that in here. Then Tessa, wrong thread. Then I was removed. I stared at my phone until the screen went dark. Second half of what? G. My hands were cold, even though the office was overheated. I unlocked my phone and checked the screenshots. I had gotten them. All 3 messages, plus the group name at the top. I did not call Tessa. I did not text Paige. I did not walk out of work and go home to demand answers. I opened our wedding spreadsheet. The spreadsheet had started as my attempt to stay sane. Vendor names, contact info, deposit amounts, final due dates, payment methods, notes. Tessa used to tease me about it, but she also relied on it. Lately, though, some of the payment notes had changed. Venue deposit, paid from joint account. Photographer balance, covered by Dad. Lighting package, covered by Dad. Rehearsal dinner room fee, covered by Dad. Florist deposit, Logan card. Cake tasting balance, Tessa Venmo. At first glance, nothing looked impossible. Graham had offered to help with some wedding costs early on, mostly because Tessa was his only daughter and he considered it his duty to complain while writing checks. But he had never mentioned specifics to me. Tessa handled that side of the family money, and I had let her because I trusted her. Trusted. Past tense looked strange even in my own head. I called Derek after work. Derek was my best friend from college and worked in fraud prevention for a credit union. He had the emotional range of a very responsible mailbox, which was exactly what I needed. He came over with takeout noodles, took off his shoes by the door, greeted Pickle with more warmth than he greeted most humans, and sat at our kitchen table. "Show me the spreadsheet," he said. I turned my laptop toward him. He scrolled without speaking. That was Derek's version of screaming. Finally, he pointed at 3-line items. "These don't match the amounts you told me you paid." "I didn't pay them. Tessa." She said her dad helped. Derek leaned back. "Then ask her dad." "Just ask him." "No, perform a one-man play first." "Yes, ask him." So I did. Graham answered on speaker while Derek sat across from me, silently eating noodles from a carton. "Hey, Logan," Graham said. "Everything okay?" I kept my voice calm. "Yeah, I'm just cleaning up the wedding budget and wanted to confirm which payments you covered so I can make sure thank you notes and reimbursements are right." There was a pause. It was not long, but it had weight. What did Tessa say I covered? That was the moment. Not the venue. Not the daycare. Not the group text. That question. I looked at Derek. He stopped chewing. I said, "The lighting package, part of the rehearsal dinner, and the photographer balance." Another pause. Then Graham sighed like a man choosing between shame and inconvenience. "Logan, I think you should talk to Tessa." "I am talking to you." He was quiet. I said, "Graham, did you pay for those?" "No." The word was flat and tired. My pulse moved into my throat. "Then who did?" He didn't answer. I said, "Was it Nolan?" Graham exhaled. "He offered to help her. I told her it was inappropriate, but she said it was a loan and she'd handle it." I felt my body go very still. Why would Nolan offer my fiancée money for our wedding? Graham said nothing. Derek put down his carton. I asked, "How long have you known Nolan was involved?" I didn't know the extent. "That isn't what I asked." Graham's voice hardened a little, probably from embarrassment. "Tessa said she had a private financial situation. She asked me not to make it bigger than it needed to be." A private financial situation with her college friend? Silence. I thanked Graham and hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Derek watched me from across the table. "Do not confront her tonight," he said. I laughed once, without humor. "That's your advice?" "That's my advice if you want to keep control of the next 48 hours. Old me would have confronted Tessa right then. Old me would have waited by the door, shaking, and demanded explanations until she either cried or yelled. Old me would have mistaken emotional intensity for progress. Instead, I did the least romantic thing possible. I documented everything. I saved screenshots. I exported the wedding spreadsheet as a PDF and sent a copy to a private email Tessa didn't use. I checked bank statements. I found vague Venmo notes from Tessa to Nolan buried under names like event stuff and lights. It was nothing illegal and nothing dramatic, but it was enough to show a pattern. I called the venue and asked Elise about cancellation terms without canceling yet. She sounded careful. "Are you asking hypothetically?" "For now." "I'm sorry," she said, and the softness in her voice told me I was not the first person to call with a hypothetical that was not hypothetical. I checked which deposits were refundable, which were transferable, and which contracts had both our names. I called my bank and asked what could be done about the joint wedding savings account. Since it required both signatures for withdrawals over a certain amount, they helped me freeze large transfers until both of us appeared in person. It felt extreme for about 5 minutes. Then I remembered Nolan asking about sending the second half. I called Maribel last. She listened without interrupting, which meant she was furious. Maribel usually interrupted traffic lights. When I finished, she said, "Do not let her turn this into a conversation about your tone." I sat on the floor beside Pickle's bed. I don't even know what my tone is right now. Good. Keep it boring. Boring is harder to argue with. She's going to cry? Probably. I hate this. I know. There was a pause. I could hear her kids yelling in the background, then a door closing. Maribel said, "Logan, listen to me. You are not trying to win a trial. You are deciding whether this is someone you can marry. Everything else is logistics." That became my anchor. The next night, I asked Tessa to sit down at the kitchen table. The rain had stopped, but the porch light reflected off wet wood outside the front window. Pickle was under my chair, chewing a tennis ball like he was trying to help. Tessa looked annoyed before she looked scared. "I have a donor breakfast early," she said. "Can this be quick?" I put my phone on the table, screen up, showing Paige's message. Her face changed slowly, like a shade being pulled down. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said. That's not what it looks like." Let me explain. "You weren't supposed to see that." I almost laughed, which would have been the wrong reaction, but not an unfair one. I said, "Is Nolan your ex?" She looked at the phone, then at me, then away. "Tessa." She closed her eyes. That was answer enough. "How long?" "Logan," she pleaded. "How long?" I asked again. "We dated in college." "That's not what I'm asking." Her eyes filled with tears. They were real tears. That mattered less than I wanted it to. I had learned something by then. Tears can be real and still not mean someone is telling the truth. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "He came back into my life after the gala in September. 8 months earlier." My brain did the math without asking permission. What does "came back into my life" mean? "We got coffee. Then." She breathed in shakily. "We talked. He was going through stuff. I was stressed. The wedding planning was already starting to feel like a lot, and he understood parts of me." "Don't," I said, cutting her off. She stopped. I said, "Do not explain your betrayal like a scheduling conflict." Her mouth tightened. "It wasn't like that at first." "Was there a first time?" She looked down. The kitchen hummed around us. Refrigerator. Old pipes. Pickle's teeth squeaking against rubber. "Tessa." "Yes," she whispered. I stood up, then sat back down because I did not trust my legs. "How many times?" "I don't know." That answer did something to me. Not because I needed a number. Because I don't know, meant enough times that counting had become inconvenient. She said it happened after her bachelorette venue fell through. She had been crying in her car. Nolan came over. They talked. They crossed a line. Then it was one mistake. Then another. Then hotel parking receipts. Then calendar invites disguised as non-profit meetings. Then calls from the porch while I loaded the dishwasher in the next room. "And the money?" I asked. She flinched. "He offered. For our wedding. For expenses I was worried about. You told me your dad covered them. I was going to fix it." "How?" "I don't know, Logan." I was overwhelmed. I nodded slowly. "Does Nolan think you're leaving me?" She didn't answer. "Tessa." He knew I was confused. The word landed like a slap. Confused. I thought about the guest list. The hotel block. My mother's dress. The cake flavor. Pickle's chewed RSVP card. Me sitting beside her at vendor meetings while she built an escape hatch with the man she called a friend. I asked, "Do you love him?" She started crying harder. "I don't know." And that answer finally freed me. Not because it stopped hurting. It hurt so badly that for a second I felt outside my body. But there is a strange mercy in a door closing all the way. You stop pushing on it. Tessa reached across the table. "Logan, please. I know this is awful. I know. But I think I spiraled. The wedding pressure, my dad, the money, everything. Nolan represented unfinished emotional business, and I handled it terribly. I looked at her hand without touching it. You were unfaithful to me and let him help pay for our wedding. She pulled her hand back. I'm not saying it that way. I am. She cried into both hands. I wanted to comfort her out of habit. My body still knew that script. The man I had been for 4 years wanted to move around the table, hold her shoulders, and tell her we could breathe for a second. Instead, I stayed in my chair. The next few days were a blur of controlled conversations. Tessa begged me not to cancel anything yet. She wanted a few days to think. She wanted counseling. She wanted me to understand that calling off the wedding immediately would humiliate both families. She said people had booked flights. She said her aunt had already bought a dress. She said we owed it to everyone not to make a rash decision. That almost worked. Not because I wanted the wedding anymore, but because embarrassment is powerful. Shame makes terrible suggestions in a reasonable voice. Then Maribel came over and sat on my porch steps while Pickle sniffed her boots. You look like hell, she said. Thanks. Have you eaten? I had half a granola bar. Recently. Define recently. She handed me a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. Eat. I did. She watched me take 2 bites before saying, "She's going to ask you to preserve her dignity at the expense of your reality." I swallowed. You practice these? No, I have children. Same skill set. I told her Tessa wanted to keep things private. Maribel snorted. Private is for problems that happened privately. She involved her ex, her friend group, her dad, your vendors, and your guest list. That ship has a hole in it. I agreed to attend what was supposed to be our final family planning dinner because people deserve to hear the truth before they lost more money on flights, hotels, and rental cars. Tessa thought that meant I was still negotiating. I wasn't. We met at a brew pub near the Pearl District, the kind with long wooden tables, exposed ducts, and a chalkboard menu listing beers with names like Hazy Decision and Rain Jacket Porter. It was supposed to be a casual planning dinner with Tessa's parents, Maribel, and me. Derek sat at the bar behind us because Maribel said, "I want one witness who isn't emotionally compromised," and Derek apparently had nothing better to do. Graham was already there when we arrived, looking 20 years older than the last time I saw him. Tessa's mom sat beside him, touching her necklace over and over. Tessa had clearly told them something, but not everything. I could tell by the way her mom looked at me with pity instead of horror. Maribel sat beside me with a folder. Tessa noticed it immediately. "What is that?" Maribel smiled without warmth. "Paper." Nobody ordered food. A server came by, sensed disaster, and left water glasses like emergency supplies. Tessa started. "Logan and I are working through something private," she said, her voice smooth and low. "We're asking for a little patience while we figure out the healthiest path forward." I stared at her for a second. There she was. Fundraiser Tessa. Gala Tessa. The woman who could stand in front of wealthy strangers and turn discomfort into a donation pledge. I said, "No, we're not doing that." The table went silent. Tessa's face tightened. "Logan, the wedding is canceled." Her mother made a small sound. I kept my voice low because I did not want a scene. Somehow, that made the words heavier. Tessa had been involved in an inappropriate relationship with Nolan, her ex-boyfriend, who she introduced to me as a college friend. Nolan also paid for several wedding expenses that Tessa told me were covered by her father. Tessa whispered, "Logan, stop." I looked at her. "You don't get to manage the wording anymore." Graham stared into his beer. Tessa's mother turned toward him. "You knew?" she asked. Graham rubbed his face. "I didn't know about the betrayal." Maribel opened the folder and slid copies of the payment notes, screenshots, and vendor totals across the table. "But you knew about the money," Maribel said. Graham said nothing. Tessa's mom picked up one of the pages with shaking hands. "Nolan paid for the photographer?" "Part of it," I said. "And the lighting?" she asked. "Yes." She looked at Tessa. "Why?" Tessa's polished expression cracked. "Because I was trying to handle it." "Handle what?" her mother asked. "Everything," Tessa said, too loudly. A few people at the next table glanced over. She lowered her voice. "The pressure, the money, everyone's expectations. I made mistakes, but Logan is choosing to humiliate me instead of working through this privately." There it was. My tone, my cruelty, my failure to provide a soft landing for her choices. I felt Maribel shift beside me, but I spoke before she could. "You invited 112 people to watch me promise my life to someone who was still deciding between me and her ex," I said. "The ugly details are the reason they're not wasting a Saturday pretending this is normal." Tessa's eyes flashed. "That is not fair." "What part?" "You make it sound calculated." I almost laughed again. "Tessa, he was paying invoices." Her face went pale. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down. Unknown number. The message said, "I know this is painful, but don't make a public mess. Tessa is fragile right now." For a second, nobody moved. Then I read it out loud. That was the first time Tessa looked genuinely scared. Because now everyone understood. Nolan wasn't a random mistake from the past. He was not some distant bad decision. He was close enough to know we were at that table. Close enough to intervene in real time. Waiting nearby, maybe physically, maybe emotionally, but waiting. Tessa's mother covered her mouth. Graham closed his eyes. Maribel said, very quietly, "Unbelievable." I texted Nolan back one sentence. "The wedding is canceled, and any money you gave Tessa is between you and her." Then I blocked him. Tessa stared at me. You can't just decide that for both of us. I can decide it for me. That's not how marriage works. We're not married. The words were simple. They did not feel simple. They felt like cutting through rope. I stood up. Maribel stood with me. Derek, at the bar, placed cash under his untouched beer and walked over like the world's calmest security guard. Tessa was crying now, not delicately. Her mother had moved away from her slightly, which seemed to hurt Tessa more than anything I said. Graham looked at me. Logan, I'm sorry. I nodded once. I believe you. But you should have told me. He looked down. I know. Outside, the air smelled like rain and fryer oil. Maribel walked beside me to the car. Derek followed a few steps behind. I stopped near the curb because my hands were shaking. Maribel put a hand on my shoulder. You did fine. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That can also be fine. Aim away from my shoes. I laughed because my body didn't know what else to do. Canceling a wedding is not one dramatic phone call. It is 30 miserable small ones. It is calling the venue and saying the hypothetical is no longer hypothetical. It is listening to Elise explain, gently, that they will keep most of the deposit but might be able to transfer part of the credit to a nonprofit event if one fits the date. It is thanking her like she gave you a kidney. It is emailing the photographer, who refunds half the balance even though the contract says she doesn't have to. It is hearing the florist say she has already ordered some materials and cannot return the deposit, then getting a follow-up email that begins, "I'm so sorry this is happening," which somehow makes you cry harder than the breakup. It is canceling the hotel block. It is telling the brewpub the rehearsal dinner is off. It is changing passwords to shared vendor portals. It is separating the remaining wedding account funds while sitting in a credit union office under fluorescent lights, across from Tessa, who looks exhausted and angry and younger than 29. She wore a gray sweater that day. I remembered buying it for her at a holiday market in the Pearl District. That was the problem with ending a long relationship. Everything in the world had a receipt attached to a memory. The bank employee asked if we agreed to split the remaining balance according to documented contributions. Derek had helped me prepare a simple breakdown. Tessa glanced at it and said, "Of course you brought paperwork." I said yes. She looked away first. I sent one email to the guest list. No accusations. No essay. Due to circumstances that make moving forward impossible, the wedding between Logan and Tessa has been canceled. Please cancel any travel arrangements. I'm sorry for the inconvenience and appreciate your understanding. I read it 12 times before pressing send. My finger hovered over the trackpad like the email was going to explode. Then it was gone. Tessa wanted a softer version. She called me 10 minutes after I sent it. "You made it sound cold," she said. "It is cold. People are going to ask questions. They would ask questions if I wrote it in calligraphy. I'm asking you not to punish me." I was standing in the kitchen, watching Pickle lick peanut butter from a spoon because he had decided my emotional crisis was snack adjacent. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm informing people the wedding is canceled." There's more compassionate language. You can send whatever you want from your own email. So she did. Her message was long and soft and full of phrases like mutual reflection, private pain, and taking space to honor what this relationship has meant. She made it sound like we had both wandered into a fog together and decided, sadly but equally, to turn around. That lasted about 2 hours. Then Paige, probably tired of being used as a human tarp, told 2 people the truth. By the next morning, the truth had done what truth does in a small social circle. It walked itself around. Not everyone took my side instantly. Real life is messier than that. A couple of Tessa's nonprofit friends sent me messages that were clearly fishing for confirmation while pretending to offer support. One aunt from her side emailed me a paragraph about forgiveness that I deleted after the first sentence. A college friend of hers unfollowed me, which seemed fair since I had not known we were following each other in the first place. But the people who mattered knew enough. Paige texted me 3 days later. "I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Yeah, you should have." She wrote back, "I know." That was the whole conversation. Nolan did not become Tessa's grand romantic rescue. I learned this later through the normal, humiliating way adults learn things they claim not to care about. Mutual friends who say, "I don't want to gossip," and then absolutely do. Apparently, Nolan asked Tessa to come stay with him in Seattle temporarily. She did, for 9 days. He posted one moody photo of a coffee cup and a rain-streaked window, which Derek sent me with the caption, "Witness protection for emotionally confusing men." I told him to stop sending me updates. He sent one more anyway. After 9 days, Nolan wanted Tessa to pay back part of the wedding money because, apparently, his noble gesture had terms. He had imagined himself saving her from the wrong life. He had not imagined invoices, grief, or Tessa crying in his apartment while he had Monday morning meetings. She moved back in with her parents. Graham called me once to apologize. It was awkward and stiff. He cleared his throat 3 times before saying, "I should have told you when I knew about the money." "Yes," I said. "I thought it was something she needed to handle. It involved my wedding." "I know." I accepted the apology because I believed he meant it. I did not tell him it was okay. It wasn't. Forgiveness and absolution are not the same thing, and I had no interest in handing out certificates. Tessa called many times. I ignored most of them. I answered once, 2 weeks after she moved out, while I was repainting the bedroom because I could not stand the color we had chosen together. We had painted it a pale green called eucalyptus mist, which sounded peaceful in the store and looked like hospital putting on the wall. I was covering it with plain white primer when my phone rang. Her name appeared. I let it ring almost to voicemail before answering. "Hi," she said. I kept rolling paint onto the wall. "Hi." There was a long silence. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. I looked at the streak of primer cutting through the green. "That's not the same as meaning to protect me." She started crying. Quietly this time. "I know," she said. "I think I know that now." I felt sad. Deeply sad. Not victorious, not clean, not healed. Just sad. But I did not feel pulled back in. That was new. She asked if we could meet for coffee someday. Not now, but when things settle. I said no. She inhaled like I had surprised her. "I don't think that would help either of us," I added. For once, she did not argue. After we hung up, I stood in the bedroom with paint on my hand and listened to the house. No vendor emails. No seating chart notifications. No conversations about whether Uncle Ray could be trusted near an open bar. No Tessa on the porch, speaking softly into the rain. Just Pickle snoring in the hallway and the roller moving against the wall. The weirdest part of canceling a wedding is how quiet your life gets afterward. At first, the quiet felt like failure. Then it started to feel like oxygen. I stayed in the duplex because the lease had been in my name before Tessa moved in. Pickle stayed with me because he was my dog first, and because Tessa admitted she couldn't handle him at her parents' place. I replaced the shower curtain because Tessa had chosen the old one, and because Maribel showed up one Saturday with groceries, cleaning supplies, and a box of trash bags like she was staging an intervention for my bathroom. She didn't say, "I told you so." She put a new loaf of sourdough on the counter and said, "You're allowed to be embarrassed. Just don't confuse embarrassment with regret." I think about that a lot. Because yes, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that people knew. I was embarrassed that I missed things. I was embarrassed that some guy I had shaken hands with at my own wedding venue had been helping pay for the day I was supposed to marry the woman he was secretly involved with. But I do not regret canceling it. 6 months later, Elise from the venue emailed me photos from the charity event that used our transferred credit. It had become a fundraiser for a free dental clinic. In one picture, there was the same ceremony wall Tessa had wanted covered in flowers. Instead, it had a banner about community care and a table full of donated toothbrush kits underneath it. For some reason, that made me laugh. Not because it fixed anything. It didn't. But because the place where I almost made the worst promise of my life got used for something honest instead. And that felt right. I learned that betrayal does not always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it arrives as a corrected sentence from a wedding coordinator, a dog daycare pickup, a group text removed too quickly, a father asking, "What did she say I covered?" I also learned that walking away does not have to be loud to be final. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is, "You don't get to manage the wording anymore." And then you pick up your dog, cancel the caterer, block the ex-boyfriend, and go home to a life that is finally yours again. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.